Okay. So yesterday, on day before yesterday, we covered on the GitHub and GitLab related concepts. Okay. So if you still have any questions or something, on the build process and the pipeline process or something, do let me know. I can help you. Uh, you know, can help you to answer those questions. Okay. And yeah, if you revisit, if you wanted to check how we have done that, on the pipeline creation, and you can still visit that video. Okay, so let us go to the next concepts. Okay. Yeah, so next one is actually, yeah, I wanted to cover on this Jenkins. Okay, so as I mentioned, like, Jenkins is not a free tool. Okay, so similarly, that's the reason I just added GitLab and also the YAML files. Okay, instead of Jenkins, I have given example in the YAML file. Okay, so similarly, you can write the pipeline or the build process, whatever we say it, like, the everything that you can do with the Jenkins file as well. Okay, so and it will be, yeah, it will be created as .jenkins file, in your project. Okay, and it is also helping us, while you know creating those pipelines. Okay. Yeah, it is same. Okay, same as, like, YAML file only. Okay, so once again, let me. Yeah. Hope you guys are able to see my screen. The PPT, right? Yeah, thanks. Yeah. Okay, so right now I'm going to cover this 3 points, last 3 points. To close this second week session. Okay, so what is security issues? With the web applications, right? So yeah, when you actually when you start developing the applications, right? In web. Okay, so there are many ways that yeah, we have many ways, like, we might see some exception cases. Okay, when we are developing these applications, right? So sometimes, it might be because of program failure. We might see some issues in the application. Okay, and sometimes, like, because of the infrastructure that we are using. Okay, so it was not suitable for the for the application. We might did not properly designed. Because of that, you might see some issues, right? So but these are like, these are like, uh, very conceptual kind of errors. Because, if you haven't designed properly, means that that you are not aware of the project, and you are not aware of the incoming requests or outgoing requests. Depending on these things only, we plan our project architecture, right? Like, how many servers we need, and how the load balance should happen. So all these things, will be, in a general way, right? So those failures are pretty much, because of your design or because of your decisions that you took it. But there are other ways that, applications are still failing. Okay, those are like your problems with your coding. Okay, and these issues are not simple issues. Okay, so how and how we are able to get these issues find out. There is a WASP tool, okay, a WASP website, okay, so which usually maintain all the um, open vulnerabilities, okay, and it was like it can give you all the security vulnerabilities, information when you go there, okay. So what is the security issue, right? Okay, so you developed an application, okay, and you did it very well, from the coding perspective, but still, if you compromise something at the security side, so when you say security, I'll just give one small example, okay. Okay, you designed a page with a login, okay, with a username and password, okay, which is taking as username and password as an input, okay, from the screen. Okay, so what you have done actually, you just directly requesting, like, I came there, I just opened that login page and I have given my user ID and password. Okay, so this one, the user ID password, once I give it to in the screen on the screen, okay, so it generally goes back and it picks my username and password and it will re-verify with the bank, right? Sorry, DB. Okay, so the DB will check whether this user is present or not. Okay, if the user is present, actually, it is going to come back and display the page saying that okay, you have logged in, right? Okay, this looks very straightforward, right? But what is the issue, right? Okay, there are plenty of issues in this. Okay, so you have to follow some coding standards, okay, to achieve security related uh, you know if you want to defend some of the security attacks, you have to follow some coding standards, okay. So the first one, whenever the user is entering something, okay, so this is a user input, right? So you have to maintain a proper validation, okay, proper validation for the each and every input coming from user, okay. So that means username and password, you are not doing a validation, okay. What you're trying to do, you're just directly giving that to a database class, like DAO class, and then DAO is returning the value to you back, okay. So this is what you're doing, okay. So now when I clicked that one, it has went to DAO and checked, and it came back, right? So similarly, now a hacker wanted to do something, he wanted to log in into this application, okay. So what he will do, he can perform many of the attacks. So one of the attack which I'm going to tell is SQL injection, okay. So because here we were looking for an username and password, right? So there is a way that we can give a universal true condition through the username and password link, okay. So generally, what you guys will do, whenever we are trying to retrieve something from the database, either we use stored procedures or we use some select queries, right? Earlier, we used to write select queries on the code itself, okay. We won't go with stored procedures. Yeah, nowadays we are following some coding standards, so it is fine, but um, we still have so many websites in that risk, okay. So what I'm telling, like in the username, okay. So now security, like the hacker or somebody, they are going to give you know some kind of condition like this, okay. Just example. So we are closing the existing condition and one or one, and I close this one, okay. So this is one or one, it is always right, or you can just mention 1 equals to 1. Something like this. Yeah. So this is what I'm gonna enter that in the username. Okay. So just check what exactly we are doing. Okay. So in the background, okay, in the code, actually what you have done, select some star from, sorry, select star from employee where user name is equals to, you are passing that username here. Okay, something here. Okay, from user input whatever, and password, right? Password is equals to this much, something. So this is our query which is executing when you're logging in. Okay, now what hacker has done, so instead of username, he passed this value. Okay, what this will do, okay, it will come here and just at the username, it is going to add, it is going to, add that extra, this one. Okay, sorry. Yeah, extra this one. Okay, so in the username, okay, so now it will look something like this. Okay. Mhm. Then, okay. Oh, sorry. Yeah. So it looks something like this. Okay. So we are closing. Okay. So we are closing the existing open one and we are making an AND condition, which is a true statement, 1 equals to 1. It is always true. And we are closing the, that complete query itself. Okay. You got my point, right? What I'm trying to say? Something like this. Okay. So when this condition executes, like, when this condition executes, even though without username, our condition is getting executed, right? So it is going to, this query is going to give you a true statement back to the UI. So what UI will do? UI will do that, okay, there is a true, okay, that means, this is user is having access to the application and he can see the dashboard. Okay, so once he see the dashboard, actually, we can, right, like, he can perform any of the actions, without any problems, right? So that is where actually this SQL injections, and the security issues are, very much important, that we need to follow some coding standards. Okay. So the basic example, to avoid these issues, right? You have to follow certain coding standard. That is, instead of using a username directly from, okay, from the browser, directly, if you are populating into the query, the DAO class without any proper validation and without any, what do you say? Yeah, without any proper validation, and also to avoid this SQL injection concepts, okay, you have to use parameterized queries, or else, you have to use stored procedures, okay, to avoid these kind of attacks. Okay. So when you use parameterized queries, actually we will we will avoid these SQL injections. And before using that parameterized queries, you have to follow some you know you have to follow validating each and every user input with a proper whitelist characters of your application. When I say whitelist characters, so whenever you design an application, so you have to know that what the data that it is going to flow from end to end, So you have to prepare you know, a regex pattern which allows all the application related characters, okay, in the application related characters in all the screen flows. Okay, so whenever anybody is trying to enter some data, any user or any person entering some data, so always verify the data, whatever they are entering through screen, it has to be verified with your regular expression, okay, which you have meant for creating a whitelist characters. And if satisfies that whitelist characters, like the values whatever who they entered, okay, which is present in your whitelist characters, then only start going for the next step. So to follow these things, actually, everywhere, we use these kind of regex patterns, to validate each and every incoming request, and in the request each and every variable, or the input, user input should be validated. Okay, so for this thing, it is a very big task, when you are doing when you are creating an application, right? So what you have to do, there is one simple example. Okay, if it is a very old application, you can just add a filter on top of everything, and you make sure that you added this filter and its URL pattern. Okay, uh, URL pattern, to go through for all the requests. So URL pattern should be something like slash star, and just give this filter name, and in the filter, for each and every flow, you validate this whitelist characters, whether we have for each and every request we are getting only the whitelist characters. So when I say whitelist characters, there are blacklist characters also. Okay, so what are those blacklist characters, right? you know there are many ways that they used to, like hackers used to hack the application, right? There are some characters which are definitely going to do perform some exploits on our code, right? So those characters are something like JavaScript. Okay, if we are getting like JavaScript related things in the code, or in the flow, then we have to avoid that. Okay, so something like in the request variable, okay, in the username, actually if somebody returns something like this, okay, script alert. Okay, instead of username, they pass some script, something like this. Okay, I'm just giving alert. Okay, but it should be something else also to retrieve your database related things, or to connect your database. We can add those code in the script tag, and they can send it through username. Okay, so whenever this occurs, right? So you have your whitelist characters. Okay, so whitelist characters will be having this script, alert, and hello. These are very plain characters, but you have to avoid these things as a you have to avoid these things actually. Okay, so in your whitelist characters, ac- the less than, greater than symbol, and there are few other symbols which should not be allowed. Okay, so that means whenever this comes, your whitelist character will say, okay, this less than and greater than symbol.
which one lo? Attorney sir. Pick lottery. No, lottery pick కూడా వాళ్ళే వేస్తున్నారు.
Hello. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, what I was trying to say, like, we need to validate each and every user input, okay, with the whitelist characters, whatever we are going to add it in the code, okay. So that particular thing, okay, so that whitelist characters is going to play a very big role, stopping these, small attacks on your application, okay. Make sure that whatever the data that is getting flowed, in the application, okay, so it will be validated with that scripts, okay, sorry, with that regular expression, whatever you are going to create it, okay. So yeah, so I mentioned, right, it is like a filter that you can add on top of the project, or you can add as an interceptor, if you are with the latest projects, okay, with the springs and all. So you can use the interceptor concept, and you can still intercept each and every request and find out whether it is a legitimate request or not, okay. So there are other ways, like you can still validate some of the things at the URL perspectives, okay. So let me come to the broken access control first, okay. So what is broken access control? Okay, these are all the top 10, okay, the latest sorry, the latest, actually, from September 24 2021. So these are the latest top 10 issues from the OWASP, okay. So the first one is broken access control. So what is this broken access control? This is a very big topic, okay. So the lot of things that it internally have it, okay. So I'm going to cover a couple of them, okay. When you say broken access control, so that means every application, whenever we log in, okay, or whenever you guys log into the application, okay, you will use your username, password, and internally, if we have some different roles, okay, for users, okay. So let's say I'm one of the user for one of the website, okay, and there are a couple of users, okay, in the same website, okay. So each and every person is having a different role, like someone is having admin, and someone is having the basic role, and someone is having some kind of power user kind of role, okay. So let's take that one, okay. So if I log in, okay, what the code will does, actually, it is going to check back at the places like where we have this authorization defined, right. So it gonna verify, and depending on that, okay, it is going to give you a response saying that, okay, you logged in and you are this, so I'm giving you this admin related screens, okay. So admin screens will be displayed for me, okay, when I log in, right. So the same way, if the other person, which power user, if he is logging in, okay, so it will verify the database, and it is depending on the access level, okay. So it is going to give you those screens, as a power user, okay. So same for the last user also. So there are three different roles that you are using in your application, and you have to be very careful between these switches, okay. So the switch between power user and admin, and the switch between the common user and admin, and common user and power user, right. So let's say I logged in as a common user now, okay. So if you don't have proper, proper stop code, like, when I say stop code means, like, if you are logging in with a common user access, and if you're trying to access a screen, which is belongs to admin or power user. Okay, so I know the URL. Okay, I'm trying to, access those admin related URL or the power user related URL, with my common user access. Okay, so will that be possible? Yeah, it will be possible if we are not maintaining, okay, the proper coding. Okay, so proper coding means, we have to maintain a logic, right? For each and every screen, if you are visiting that, we need to identify whether this user is responsible, or whether this user is okay to log in or okay to view the screen. So if that kind of code is not present in our application, then you can easily switch through, between one user to, like, one user access level to the other user access level screens. Okay, you can easily access. Okay, so we call it as privilege escalation, or uh, privilege escalation. That means, like, you are accessing a different privilege role, even though you don't have access, so which is come under broken access control. Okay, so privilege escalation is kind of, getting unauthorized access, okay, for the role that you are not belongs to in the application. So you can still see those screens. Okay, so that means, we have a privilege escalation on our application. Okay, so you have to write a code which needs to stop, okay, to viewing these screens. Okay, so that means, like, there are many ways that you can fix it. Okay, these kind of privilege escalations for each and every screen, you can validate what kind of user it is going, or else there is a way that we do. Okay, we use legitimate URLs. Okay, like, let's say if the common user logs in, so what are all the URLs that he may hit, what are all the pages that he may hit. Okay, so we usually maintain a kind of a list of URLs for common user, and list of URLs, for the power user, and list of URLs, okay, for the super user. Take that. Okay, admin. Okay, so all these things will maintain in our inventory or database. Okay, so let's say, whenever a person trying to access, the other URL, okay, like, super user URL, I logged in as a common user, and I just tried to tamper my URL with the super user page. Okay, so whenever this hit happened, we already have a filter which is holding all these URLs, or we already have an interceptor which already holding this intercept, these all values. Okay, URLs. Okay, so once it hit that interceptor or filter, so it is going to validate. Okay, so this user is a common user. Okay, so first it will validate, what is your access level, and this is a common user, and it is going to verify the URLs which are stored in the list. Okay, so that list will contain, very respective URLs of our that person's access level, right? So it is going to compare with the URL whatever we are trying to, hit, right? So that if the URL is not present in that list, definitely it is going to stop that common user, saying that, okay, this is not your access level. So your access level is still, as a common user, you cannot access this one. So some kind of message it is going to display, right? So this is one way. Okay, there are plenty of ways that you can still stop those kind of privilege escalations attacks. Okay, so that, this is one of the broken access control. So one of the technique that, hackers can use, to access your applications. Okay, Second one. Okay. So let us go to the another one, which have very decent, always it will be, affecting our applications, most probably. So cross-site scripting, and server-side request forgery. Okay. So these are very, sorry. Okay. Till now, any questions? Like, if you have any questions or something, I can go deeper. Otherwise, I'll continue with the second, the other issues. Yes, no question. Okay, can anyone tell, like, what we can use? I know what kind of the coding technique that we can use, to stop privilege escalation. Just, just one line. Yeah, I'm audible, right? Okay, no questions. Yeah. Okay, so let me go to the server side request forgery. Okay, so server side request forgery is also called as SSRF. Okay, so this attack involves an attacker abusing server functionality, you know, to access or modify the resources on the server. Okay, so attacker can target the application. Okay, that supports data imports from URLs or allows to read data from URLs. Okay, so when on what situations which we may face more issues, right? Okay, so if your URL is having something like this, okay. Okay, something.com, and you are having some website name and some class name, some JSP, something like that. This.jsp, and it is having some values like equals to 10 and b is equal to 20. Okay, so you are passing something, okay, these kind of values, okay, to the server, right, from the URL itself. Okay, so these things, okay, can really harm our application. Okay, so you should not pass anything on the URLs. Okay, so it is the basic things that we need to learn first. Actually, whenever we are having something, web application, so you should not pass any of the URL, any of the variables, values, sorry, parameters, through URLs. Okay, so, and okay, if you are strictly passing that, okay, you have to, again, you have to intercept that ticket, that request whenever it is coming from a UI, and you have to really validate it, with your whitelist characters, and if you really want to validate with your blacklist characters also, you can still, you know use it. Okay, but the recommendation is like, we should not pass anything from the URL. Okay, so either you have to wrap it, that request, with some kind of uh, you know sorry, yeah, you have to wrap that request, and you have to send it for the response. But yeah, mostly try to avoid passing these values from the URLs. Okay, so they can intercept the tick request, and they can change the values while on the flow. Okay, so that's how it does. Okay, so that is why I'm just saying that don't go with this kind of URLs. Okay, so but your application is having this. Okay, so and you did not written a proper validation inside of it. Okay, so how this is going to affect your server, right? So let's say you are having some database connections with this particular call. Okay, whenever they're coming to some that test.jsp, and you are trying to retrieve those values from URL, and you are hitting the database. Okay, right? So you don't have proper validation, and you just went into database to retrieve something. Okay, so instead of these values, okay, so they might send some kind of scripts. Okay, so what scripts? Okay, there are plenty of scripts. I will try to get one. Just a minute. Okay. Yeah, I don't have it handy. 1 second. Just a minute. I'll just get one. Okay. So yeah, by this, with this URL, actually, you are trying to access your one of the server, right? Okay. So now an attacker can, also access our server. Okay. So internally, they can pass some kind of script. I did not get anything right now. Okay, I'll definitely share one of the script. Okay, so that script will cause an issue with our server. Okay, how, right? It is going to connect with our internal services. Okay, or it is going to retrieve our server related information, and potentially leaking all the like where exactly this server has been connected, and what it is, the internal related of the servers, right? The details of servers. Okay, so it is going to leak, and it is going to send back to the hacker. Okay, so in typically, like SSRF attack is like attacker can get, might cause the server to make a connection to internal only services within the organization. Okay, so in other cases, like they may be able to force the server to connect to some arbitral external systems, and arbitrary external systems. Okay, potentially leaking some sensitive data such as authorization credentials or something like that. Okay, so what will be the impact, right? When we have this kind of attack. Okay, so what will be the impact? Okay, so whenever a successful SSRF attack happen, okay, so often result in unauthorized actions, okay, or access to data within the organization, either in vulnerable application itself or the backend systems also. So that means the application who they use it to attack our server, they are going to have the problems with that, and also it might affect the server whatever we are using it for that application. Okay, so this exploit, right, that causes connections to external third party systems might result in malicious onward attack. Okay, that appears to originate from organization hosting the vulnerable application. Okay, so this thing, like it may go on another step also, that as they have some internal information of our application, right, the server related information, so they can like start attacking more kind of attacks on the server. Okay, so for that, okay, if they are starting, if they are pushing some more attacks on the server side, okay, so it may cause our application failures. Okay, and it may bring down our servers continuously. Okay, denial of service attack, there are multiple attacks that they can do on the servers. Okay, so once they have some information, okay, related to our application and server. Okay, so that's how the server side request forgery is very critical. I know, while you're using the URLs and all. Okay, whenever don't mostly don't pass any data from the URLs. Okay, so it may cause so many issues. Okay, even though if it is really needed, yeah, we require a proper intent validation, that you can just add it, or you can take the user encoded and encoding URLs, you have to follow them, and you have to validate that request. That is our main first intention, actually, to avoid these kind of security issues. Okay, yeah, so I'll go with one more, vulnerable and outdated components. Okay, so vulnerable and outdated components will come in a different way. Okay, so if you are developing an application using a Java, so, or using some Spring, so these are all like open source applications, right? Okay, so open source APIs that we are using, okay, to develop one of the application. Okay, so these things may have some existing vulnerabilities that we are not aware. Okay, these APIs, the jar files that you are including in your application, okay, may have some vulnerabilities which may cause your application also into a risk, right? So yeah, what we need to do to like generally these kind of open source libraries, whatever we use it. Okay, uh, if they have some issues, okay, generally they have posted in, those issues will be posted using some CVE numbers. Okay, so common vulnerability CVE numbers, something like that, it will be. Okay, I'll give you one small example. So okay, it looks something like this. Okay, CV. So we call it as common vulnerability errors. Okay, and this will be this is actually for a Log4j. Okay, some time back. Okay, CV 2021. Okay, Log4j issue. Okay, so what it does, right? These common vulnerabilities, okay, will cause an issue with your application also. Okay, so you have to be very careful, like while using these kind of external libraries in your application. Okay, and you have to make sure that instead of going with the older jar file versions, you have to go with the latest versions. Okay, so how do you identify these CVEs, right? Okay, you can still visit. Okay, uh, there's a website. Okay, same OWASP. Okay, so try to find out what are all the open source libraries that you are using. Okay, let's say if you are using Log4j, so what are all the CVEs that it already have, on which version it is affected. Okay, so you have to find out those things before using any of the open source libraries in your application, so which will definitely help to avoid this CVEs on your application, and you don't require to do any changes whenever whenever you are designing that project actually. Yeah, that might be okay. When you are designing the application, you follow at that time whatever the latest version that you have, you will use it. But later, sometime after designing it, you might have some issues with the same version, right? So you may go for the next version, like the current version might be outdated. So you have to frequently get those updates and try to avoid those common vulnerabilities which may cause while using these open source libraries. Okay, so the frequent updates of the open source libraries should be there. Okay, when we are having an application. So if not, okay, there are few things actually. If not, what will happen? Okay, this common vulnerability identified for today. Okay, for Log4j. Okay, so that same version of Log4j that you are using it in your application. Okay, which is having a common attack. Okay, it can lead to a common attack for any of the application, whichever that application is using. Okay, the same jar file. Okay, so now you are not aware of the CVE. Okay, and your application is also impacted with that CVE. Okay, that common vulnerability. Okay, because you are using the same jar file, and you never know, your application is attacked because of this. Okay, so you have to be very, always need to verify these kind of issues, and you have to know which version I need to go and which version I need to upgrade. So for these kind of things, actually internally in the companies, okay, they are using certain tools, which will help you to identify your open source libraries vulnerabilities. Okay, so one of the tool is like checkmarks. Okay, so this checkmarks is having couple of scans, okay, that we do regularly in companies. Okay, so the first one is, whenever you go with check marks, there is one scan that we use it, source code scanning factory. Okay, SSCF. Okay, so what this does, whenever you submit some code, whenever you are writing some code, you just give that complete code to check marks, and it is going to validate, or it is going to scan your code with the whether do we have any security issues present. Okay, like it can be able to identify the cross-site scripting and SQL injections, and number of other signatures, attack signature attacks. Okay, there are number of things that it can scan it, and it will give you the recommendations to fix those code. Okay, similarly there is a SAST. Okay, so SAST means, like it can still validate the jar files, okay, which are open source jar files, and it is going to review with the inventory, okay, whether this particular version of the jar file is having any common vulnerability, any CVE items exist. So if it is there, it is going to give you, a suggestion, to upgrade it, to the latest version, because OWASP and all these things, will have the problem and also the solution sometimes, okay, not all the times actually, it might have a solution, it might not, okay. So for the common vulnerability, let's say, log4j 1.2 that you're using now, it will suggest you to use 2.41, okay. So internally, companies are having different tools to maintain and your application up to date. Okay, so utilize them, and make sure your application not vulnerable because of this outdated components, and you don't require to specifically go and check for each and everything. You can still utilize these kind of tools, okay, in organization, okay, so to identify them. Okay, so this is one of the concept, okay, for vulnerable and outdated components. And yeah, so let me go with one more: identification and authentication failures. Okay, so what is this identification and authentication failure, right? Okay, so let us take one thing, okay, one application, okay, which you are trying to log in. Sorry, yeah. Okay, so so what you generally do whenever you have a screen, okay, you generally log into there, okay, with using your user ID and sorry, user ID and password. Okay, so whenever a user ID and password you enter into a screen, and when you hit that login button, okay, so it might call a function inside your code, right? It might call a class, okay, inside the code, and it is going to identify whether this user is a proper user or not, right? So okay, so in this case there are two things that you need to consider. First one is user identity, and also authentication, what on which basis you are using that authentication, and the another one is session management. Okay, so let's say if you are using a screen, like three screens are there, okay, in the whenever you log in, okay. So the first screen, you're trying to log in, and there are three screens internally once you log in, okay. So one of the screen, if you did not implemented a proper authentication kind of thing, like like some coding issue was there, okay. So I'll tell you what is that issue, okay. And you logged in, okay. First you tried to logged in there, and the function, whichever it is validating your user, legitimate user or not, it validated and mentioned, okay, this is the user which we already have in the database, okay. So that means your application will allow you to log in, right? Okay, so now you are in the application, okay. So when you went to the first screen, actually you are okay, okay, and you are able to perform your operations and all, okay. And when you go to the second screen, okay, so there's a problem comes, okay. In the second screen, if you don't have proper session management, okay, so proper session management you don't have on the second screen, so which may cause some failure of authentication, okay. So that means generally whatever we do whenever we log in, either way we use our username into the session, or some of the user related things that we store it in the session to validate throughout the application, right? So those things might fail, okay. Those things might fail because if you don't have proper session management, okay. So this kind of attack will identify those failures, okay? Those failures, like, on which page that you might have some kind of authentication related issues, okay, or session management issues, okay. So this kind of attack can help an attacker to know on, on this application where exactly we have similar kind of issues, okay. I'm really sorry, my throat is one second. Okay, so yeah, sorry for that. Okay, so how they can achieve these things, right? There are multiple ways, okay, to achieve, like, to identify these things, okay. So there is one kind of attacking, session hijacking or credential stuffing, like, we say like brute force, okay. And we already have that cross-site request forgery, okay. All these kind of attacks, okay, can, find out where exactly we have broken authentication, or, identification, of authentication failures can happen using these attacks, okay. So what they will identify, once they have it, once they have something, right, let's say, one of your screen is having some authentication failures, like, it is allowing a user without proper validation, okay. So that means, like, there is some issue with that particular screen. So if an attacker came to know with that screen, they can easily start, multiple attacks on that particular screen, okay. So yeah, so that's where, how you properly implement, right, this identification authentication failures. There are two ways, okay. Like, you can use some techniques, okay. Generally what we do, we use it our passwords to log in, okay, to the applications, right. And there is a monitoring that, we have it, okay, in an organizations, okay. The one of the standard that we follow. So we validate all the login attempts, okay, on the application. Okay, what kind of login attempts, right? If you we have a tool, kind of a COPS, okay, COPS tool, okay. So that what it does, this COPS tool will be, feeded the login data, for one of the website. So it is frequently monitoring those logins, okay. So what kind of login it is, and, it is going to have an artificial intelligence algorithm, okay. So let's say, most of the users for one of the application, let us consider it's an internal application or, external application, and, most of the users are validated in the day from the database, or, in some other component that we are trying to validate our user, okay. So either this user might present in our system, okay, or some other system, where we are validating it, okay. So we have this COP system, what it does, okay. So it internally holds all the login request, for last 1.5 year or 2 years, okay. So let's say, a person logged in now, and, he was trying to log in to our application, and, he wanted to see some page, okay. So once he logs in, this COP system will find, capture that login, and it is going to verify what are all the previous logins, okay, this user has been, done, okay. So we have an entire logging system which is completely monitoring these logins, okay. And it will verify whether this user performed any legitimate, sorry, any, unwanted, or, access, whether he tried something, okay. So those things, we usually capture it whenever we have an application, okay. So those data, this COPS, COPS COPS service, okay, it is going to validate it, and if it feels this is like, this user already performs some kind of, unwanted functions on our application, or unwanted access on our application, he wanted to, he tried previously, then it immediately, alerts our application, okay, saying that, okay, you should not allow this user. Okay, this is a continuous service which runs in the background, and if the user is already logged into our application, application is immediately going to terminate that session. Okay, whenever if he has some click, like, if he's going to click on other link, so generally we maintain that session management, right? Okay, so it is going to stop that session, and it is going to stop the user from the access. Okay, so how it does, actually we store all these sessions, whenever a user is logging in, we store all these sessions into our DB. Okay, and we maintain a single session. Okay, if the user is trying to access, from another application, or from another browser, if the session is already active in the database, we will not allow the user to log in from there, right? So you know that way, actually, we can still prevent using that COPS related services. Okay, we were still able to stop unwanted accesses, whether these users are doing it or not. We were able to identify that. Okay, so this is one of the way which we can stop failing those password related, and sorry, authentication failures. And we were trying to identify these authentication failures, from the initial times. Actually, what we do, we initially we feed the complete flow of our application for each and every access level user. Okay, so and this COPS system will be able to identify, okay, on which place that you know uh, we might have some vulnerability on the application, and it usually give those output for us. Okay, so yeah, I did not went into very internal of the COP system, because we have very, very, very big algorithms, to identify them. Okay, so these are the concepts that we have it in the organization. Okay, so you might be having them, but you have to know that, you have to understand those concepts, and you have to implement in your application to avoid these, most popular security issues. Okay. So yeah, let me cover the other two or something tomorrow, and we'll continue with the next topics with the Spring related concepts and MVC related concepts tomorrow. Okay. Any questions? Okay. I'll take it as no. Okay. If you have any questions, do ping me, and I can, yeah, I'll try to answer them. Yeah. If you don't have any questions, okay, we can wind up the session. Thank you all.